Welcome, everyone, to the Asian Voices Radio podcast, where you'll find real Asian American and Pacific Islander conversations about topics including things you were too afraid to ask your Asian parents. I'm your host, Hula Ramos, and today's going to be a really special day. I've known this special guest that we have coming on the show for quite a long time. Let me just read you some of his accolades. He is the recipient of numerous awards, commendations, and recognition for his community involvement and outreach efforts. For the past decade, he's hosted and produced many cultural events and festivals in San Diego, namely the Asian Cultural Festival of San Diego, the San Diego Ramen Festival, and the AMP Music Festival, and many more. He is also known for his humanitarian efforts around the globe. He's volunteered at an orphanage in Thailand. He's helped build a classroom, volunteered at an educational center in Indonesia. He's taught English, distributed water filters. He's also been in Kenya, Tanzania, and he's also brought supplies to Nepal. I mean, that's just a couple of things he's done, but he's done much more, and we're going to talk more about that with him. Please welcome Dennis Michael Broussard. How you doing, Dennis Michael?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on the show, Hula.
Of course. I mean, for those that don't know, you're known as DM, so I'm going to refer to you as DM just in case, you know.
That's totally cool.
I had to do the formal introduction, but real quick, DM, tell us a little bit about you. I mean, I kind of talked about your accolades, but, you know, where are you from? Where were you born? Like, let's start right at the very beginning.
Ooh, at the beginning, huh? Let's see. So I was born in the U.S., but before I was even able to walk, we moved out of the U.S. My father was in the Navy. And so we were all over kind of the Pacific, but mostly in the Philippines because my mom is Filipino.
Okay.
And we lived there for quite a while. And then, you know, when their marriage didn't work out, then I ended up moving to the U.S. When I was 12. And I ended up moving to New Orleans to live with my father's family. My side of French descent, so my white side. And I lived there in New Orleans until I moved to San Diego for graduate school. And I just kind of stuck around. And as I was getting more involved, I was getting involved with different organizations, meeting cool people like you. And it just snowballed from there.
Like, I mean, you know, you're going to, you know, just living your life, you know, going through your life, and you get into college. And what got you into like doing a lot more humanitarian? Like, did you think your life was going to be this way at an early age, or how did you get involved with all of these amazing organizations?
Yeah. So no, I did not think that I was going to be kind of involved with humanitarian efforts. When I moved to San Diego, one of my motivations to get involved with community organizations was just to meet people, because I had come out here not knowing anybody, and I was kind of alone. And so I was volunteering for different organizations, different nonprofits, American Cancer Society, the Japan Society, the different organizations. And the more that I was doing nonprofit work, the more that I felt community work was going to be a focus for me, an emphasis in my life. And that coupled with me, like, traveling is a deep, deep passion of mine, I eventually merged those two passions and interests and doing, you know, community work, giving back, doing stuff for the disenfranchised, impoverished, the underserved communities, whatever. And then traveling, I was like, I can combine these. So I started, first of all, by volunteering for the International Humanitarian Foundation, who has orphanages and education centers all over throughout Southeast Asia, primarily in Indonesia, but also in Thailand. And one of my first real international efforts was volunteering for that organization in Chiang Rai in the north of Thailand. So I was there for about 2 weeks, just kind of helping out at the orphanage, and helped to build a classroom there. And well, the room was built already, but we like cleaned it up and fixed it up, and it's still operating to this day.
Oh, wow.
As a classroom for the kids who were there. And that was quite a long time ago. And since then, I've gone from getting involved with these organizations who have something set already, they've got their operations in place, to being inspired to do my own thing. And I eventually ended up doing work in water, bringing bringing water filters to places that don't have access to clean drinking water. And I've done that a number of times in a number of
Mhm.
countries, mostly throughout Africa, but also in the Philippines.
Right. Right. No, I mean, like I said, I've known you for quite a while. And originally, when we first met, it was through your organizations where you were, planning events. And, you were bringing Asian culture into the forefront, which I thought was amazing because, living in San Diego, yes, growing up, myself, Filipino in Spring Valley, California, you don't really, you see your culture, but you don't see it showcased very much. And it's cool what you've done. You've brought the culture into the forefront. So kudos to you on that. But now you utilize your skills doing that into doing these humanitarian efforts, and it just goes hand in hand. I mean, it's amazing what you do.
Thanks. Yeah. As far as the cultural events, yeah, in one of the other first organizations I got involved with was San Diego Asian Film Festival. And
Right.
so through that, I met a lot of other people. And then I got eventually involved with the Phil Am Fest. And I know you've been a part of that for many years when it was
Right.
back in its heyday. And when I got control of that, me and this lady, Liliane, who now lives in the Bay Area, Liliane
Hmm.
Villaraza, she and I took what was a very small event and made it into a massive, massive Filipino event for Filipino American History Month in October. And the
Right.
first year that we did it, we were expecting like 2,000-3,000 people, but we had almost 10,000 people that first year, and it just
Right.
kept growing from there. It became the biggest Filipino American event in Southern California, rivaling even the Filipino Festival in Los Angeles at a time.
Wow.
Yeah, and
That's
then from
huge.
there, yeah, that was huge. And from there, uh, you talking about bringing Asian cultures to the forefront, right? Like there
Right.
was nothing really in San Diego for Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, which is May. So me
Hmm.
and a bunch of friends, also all people who are interested in community and giving back and creating fun events. We decided let's do something for Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. There's so many Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in San Diego, but nothing to commemorate. Nothing on a large scale. There was a dragon boat race, but it was like, okay, that's a couple hundred people. And it's
Right.
cool that there's that, but there wasn't anything really big. And then we created the Asian Cultural Festival to do that. And we went 10 years strong, 10 years in a row,
Hmm.
up until last year, the pandemic.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking, yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's just one of those things, that we all didn't expect, and it's definitely changed a lot for a lot of, especially what you do. Speaking of the events, not only let's be honest, not only did you like bring these events out to the forefront and brought out, Asian culture, Asian Pacific culture to in front of a lot of people that maybe wouldn't see it, but you also link that to humanitarian efforts, because a lot of times a lot of your cultural events would lead into raising money for an organization, and which would allow you to bring that money and do cool things with these underserved areas. So I mean, just seeing all that linking together is just amazing.
Totally. Like when I first started doing events, I did it as a side project. It wasn't even a business. It wasn't anything that I was looking to do on a full-time basis. It was just something I wanted to do something cool, and I wanted someone to benefit from it. So in my early days of just doing this as a side project, I was helping out these organizations that no one knew about that I thought had great causes
Hmm.
and were worthy of any media attention, of worthy of any spotlight. So there was the National Ovarian Cancer Coalition. There was this, I forget the name, but there's this organization that was based in Tijuana, and they helped kids with AIDS.
Hmm.
And and even before I went to Africa, I was helping this organization called Africa Aid with the different events that I was producing, or I wasn't even thinking about producing them then. I was just putting them together and inviting people to come, and it
Right.
just everything snowballed from there.
No, and it's awesome. Like I said, I've known you for a while, and to see what you've created and what you've done, it's commendable. So congrats to you on all that stuff. But besides being, this event planner and humanitarian, you have something on your Facebook page. I do follow you on Facebook. It's called DM World Adventures. Tell me a little bit about what that's all about.
Oh, so you're my one follower on that page, huh?
I am one, yes, the
I look
one.
at my views and I'm like, oh, I got one view today. Oh, now I know who it is.
It's me.
Yeah, so DM World Adventures is my travel blog. It's kind of like instead of just using my personal Facebook page to just incessantly post and just drown everyone's feed with my travel stuff, I just created a second a second Facebook page to document like my adventures and to put stuff on there. And it's primarily for me to go back through and be like, oh, this was cool. Look at these pictures, and this is where
Right.
the places that I've been. But slowly, people have been appreciative of the pictures that I've been able to put up, or the things that I'm able to share. Because whenever I go somewhere and I post a picture of something, it's not just like, oh, here's a monument or whatever. Like I'll look up about it and then write the history
Right.
or something about it. Like I'll go to Wikipedia and be like, oh, okay, this isn't. I'll put the history and what's significant about it, what's relevant about it, like, and just so that it's more of an educational thing too. Again, primarily for me, but for anyone who happens to come upon my page and they'll be like, wow, that's cool. What is this? And they can read exactly what it is and why it's relevant or significant or important.
Yes, and if you want to check it out again, let me remind you, it is DM World Adventures. Again, DM World Adventures. But speaking of world adventures, and we brought up the whole pandemic, obviously with travels, that's kind of changed. And you were telling me off the air about a situation where you were literally traveling all the way up to March of 2020. Where were you again, and what happened?
I was in East Africa. I was doing another humanitarian project in Uganda this time. I was going to the north of Uganda to distribute water filters. There's a pastor who lives up there, a friend of mine, Okello, who I had met when I had gone to Kenya 3 years before that to do the same thing in Kenya. So last March, I was going to Uganda to the north part to a town called Gulu outside of Noya. I'll never
Hmm.
say that right, but it's Noya. And we went to this village called Gulu where there's water, but it's not clean. And they're having a hard time getting like, I don't know what the term for it is, like clean, drinkable, potable water
Like filtered
to,
water.
yes, filtered water, safe water,
Hmm.
to like people who lived not necessarily directly in the town. They lived a little bit outside of the town. There was
Okay.
no, or there is no like sewage or pipes to bring water out there. And the prevalence of water filters uh, is like they're either not good enough or they're really outdated or really
Hmm.
old styles of water filter, or they just can't afford them.
Hmm.
So I had brought like 100 water filters to distribute to, yeah, people in need. So my friend Okello, he's a pastor, and he has access to like, you know, people who have little means, people who don't have a lot of money or but have the need for something like clean water. Well, everyone has the need for clean water, but they just don't have access to it.
Right.
So I went up there and I thought, okay, 100 water filters, 100 is like nowhere near enough, but it's all I could really bring. You know, I'm just one person, and I was raising money to do this, and as much as I want to help with what I can, it's just never enough.
Right.
And then you have to be picky, you have to be selective about how you distribute it. And for me, like talking to Okello, he has a church, he has a congregation, so I'm giving more of the water filters to the church. That way there's more like it's more accessible to poor people instead of like individual. Yeah, I want to give every single individual a water filter, right? But it doesn't serve the greatest good to give it to one person versus where more people will have access to clean water. So gave it to the church, his church up there in Gulu, and then we met the city council members for that town, and then I gave them
Hmm.
a bunch because they were able to distribute to other people who weren't necessarily members of his church. And so, yeah, going back to your question, that trip ended, and I was on my way home the day before the travel ban was instated. So I was kind of like, okay, the travel ban is tomorrow. I'm leaving tonight. My flight is tonight, but technically it's tomorrow. So I was kind of like in this gray area. I was like, am I going to be able to get back in? And as
Right.
I have my layover in Frankfurt, in Germany, it may not have been Frankfurt, but I'm waiting in the airport and I'm hearing all these other like Americans who are all they're all talking about having changed their travel plans. They all coughed up the extra money to be able to fly back into the U.S.
Hmm.
before they thought that they couldn't get in, because no one really understood the travel ban. No one really knew what it meant. We all just kind of like vaguely heard, and this state, there's no more entry into the U.S. But uh, later on, I found out that that didn't necessarily mean for American citizens. That just meant for anyone coming in. But it was so unclear that everyone was
Right.
afraid of being stuck outside of the U.S.
So, wow, that's so crazy. Obviously nobody knew exactly what was going on, but obviously you got back into the country because I guess of those vague moments of not knowing what exactly was going on. So it worked. You're in. But as far as I heard, you recently traveled, correct?
Yeah, over the New Year break, my lady and I, we went over onto Egypt. That was a trip that I had bought pre-pandemic, and the whole year, as all of my trips are being canceled, and I am an avid traveler. I know the good deals and whatever. So I had a few trips planned throughout the summer, and every international trip between May and November got canceled. So
Hmm.
our turn of the year trip, our New Year's Eve trip to Egypt, I was convinced that that was going to be canceled as well, but it wasn't. Egypt had reopened, I think, in like mid October,
Okay.
and so long as you had a negative COVID test, right? So every country that, even if no matter what their level of openness is, you still have to have a negative COVID test, depending on the country, 72 to 96 hours taken before you enter the country.
Right.
So that was something that we were stressing about, because it's like, okay, it's Christmas time. We got to take this COVID test and we got to get the result before we go to the airport. But
Hmm.
how do we time it? How do we know when the result is going to come in? So that was kind of a stress in and of itself. And luckily, we took the test a few days before we left, like 2 days before we left. Both of us, we got our results the next day, and then we were
Hmm.
able to show that to the airline, show that to the airport where we had a layover, and to show that upon entry into Cairo. So that was kind of a scare. That was a stressor right there. And yeah, I went to Egypt. We were there for like 2 weeks, and that was really interesting. That was, and I'm not sure where to talk first on this trip. I'll let you ask me a question about it.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious now with the travel bans and all the hoops we have to go through in regards to taking the negative COVID tests and all that stuff. Like, how has been traveling different? Like, obviously planes aren't as full, and how is it traveling across
The
country?
plane was not full at all. In fact, we were in the same row, but we went to different rows so we can have a complete row to ourselves, so we can lie down and sleep on some of the flight. I could have chosen from about 15 different rows. The flight
Wow.
was not full at all, to Germany. However, the flight from Germany to Egypt was a little bit more full. It wasn't at 100% capacity, but there was significantly more people on that flight going into Cairo, because it is one of the open countries.
Hmm.
Open pending, of course, a negative
Negative
COVID
COVID
test.
tests. Right.
And of course, the airlines mandate require you to have a mask on, so everyone's got to wear their mask, and they're pretty good about enforcing it. Whenever someone has removed it, they'll tell you to put it on. You can only take it off to eat, and then you got to put it right back on. But in Egypt, when we arrived there in Cairo, there was a health checkpoint. Everyone's checking temperature,
Hmm.
making you use the hand sanitizer, and there were at least two temperature check locations, and then that everyone wants to see your COVID test.
Right.
So showed that to everyone, and then we were in the country. There were people in Los Angeles on the way to Germany who did not take their COVID test in time.
Hmm.
They were not allowed on. And I had
Really?
heard their conversation. They thought it's from when you get the results, but it's from when you take the test. So they took the test a little bit too soon. And so they were not allowed on the flight. And the same thing happened in Germany.
Wow.
And if there's anyone who's a stickler for rules more than anyone else, it's the Germans. And there's this one lady with her kid who was like maybe 1 or 2 hours outside of the 72-hour period.
Mm-hmm.
And she was not allowed in. She was not allowed on the plane. And she was like, it's just 1 hour. And there's no bend. Sometimes you just can't bend the rules, right?
Right, right.
And so she wasn't allowed on. And I just felt lucky that we were within the time frame that was required. And then, when we got there and we're on these excursions, first of all, our excursions are private. There's no one else because they're really limiting it so
Mm-hmm.
that you're not stuck with strangers. You do have a guide, and the guide is wearing a mask. And they've also got sanitizer. As soon as you step in the vehicle, they're shooting it on your hands, and you got to keep the mask on. And we're going to sites, and it's crazy. It's crazy to me because, like, there's me, Jeannie, and no one else. We're at like
Wow.
the pyramids, right?
Uh-huh.
And there's no one else there. I don't think that this will ever happen again, that someone can visit the pyramids and have like no one else in the background of your picture. You can straight up take it and you're the only one in the shot. I don't have to Photoshop anyone out or nothing.
Wow. So it's like your own private like moment in
That's
front
what
of
it
the
felt like.
pyramids.
Throughout Egypt, that's what it felt like. Well, primarily in Cairo.
Uh-huh.
And we had gone to many different sites, many different pyramids, and almost every time, if there were people, there were very few people,
Right.
not that many. And I have pictures upon pictures of just me or us with no one else in it, and it's just like crazy because I'm thinking this is never going to happen again. So as
Right.
much as I'm like, as much as I can feel for the people and their economy, how they're hurt based on like low tourism, even though I hear that it's picking up, which is good for them. Their economy's been hit really bad. The people are suffering. They're not making the money that they were. They can't support their families or feed them or whatever. And that's terrible. And I don't want to counter that being like, it's great for me because there's no one else in my picture. But like,
Right.
if I'm going to say one silver lining about that, it is that like we had it to ourselves. Now, it's terrible what's happening in their economy there and anywhere, everywhere.
Right. Right.
But it was pretty cool to have it to ourselves. But I still got to say it sucks for their economy.
No, absolutely. And I think most people can understand. I mean, but it's definitely, for you, you're allowing the audience to see, how it's like traveling nowadays. And, you do have that exclusive moment or feeling where it's almost deserted and you're the only people in this country.
Right. And, when we got back, I had to take another COVID test because as soon as we got back, Jeannie, she went back up to Sacramento and
Mm-hmm.
I was going to Ecuador. That was one of my canceled trips from last summer. And January is a pretty slow month for me. So I rescheduled it for January. So 5 days after coming back from Egypt, I'm on another plane, taking another negative COVID test or taking another test that was negative, and I'm on my way down to Ecuador. And it's the same story there.
Mm-hmm.
I flew out to the Galapagos Islands, and they're telling me that they usually have like 25,000 or so people, or no, they have a town of 50,000 people, and right now it's under 20,000 people. There's not enough
Wow.
tourists. They went 8 months without allowing anyone onto the island. People weren't able to work. People weren't able to make money. And so a lot of them moved back to the mainland. And it's only recently that they've allowed tourism to come back up there. But in the meantime, a lot of the animals and a lot of marine life has come back because it's been like unmolested. It's been untouched for so long
Right.
that over there in the Galapagos, they're going to restrict tourism from the month of September and give nature like 1 month of recovery from no boats, no tours, no nothing. So that was
And I
another
guess
cool, unique experience too.
that's another silver lining you bring up, because it's not only happening there in your situation, but I've heard of other places where, a lot of scenic areas are, growing, greenery everywhere because there's not a lot of people. And also, animals are coming back out because of the fact that there aren't a lot of tourists. And so there's, it's pros and cons of everything going on. Yes, the economy is down for those countries and those people, but it seems like on the reverse side, the nature, the environment is healing from all of this tourism that it's so used to.
Right, right.
So for you, do you have any big bucket list trips that you have yet to go to, or even any upcoming humanitarian trips, obviously with COVID aside, after, it's all said and done, we all get vaccinated, and we get to some sort of normalcy, which there isn't going to be back to that normal pre-COVID, but, back to some sort of normalcy. Do you have any bucket list destinations?
Totally, man. Totally. And well, first of all, a personal goal of mine is to reach like every country in the world. So
awesome.
Any place that I haven't been is a bucket list place for me, even places that people don't care about. Places that people have no intention to go to. I want to go there because I want to go to every country in the world. I want to meet people from every country. I want to eat the food. I want to have the drinks. I want to celebrate. I want to get to know people from every country in the world. So that's a bucket list, totally anywhere I haven't been. In fact, my next trip, and hopefully things kind of continue on the path to getting better, is to Qatar and Bahrain. And I know I'm saying it wrong because I watched this YouTube video about how to pronounce Qatar. Is it Qatar? Is it Qatar?
Right.
And the guy on the video is like, it's Qatar. And like, I'm not saying Qatar. I'm saying Qatar or Qatar.
Qatar, right.
So that's not like a dream destination, but I definitely am interested in visiting those two countries and checking it out. And that's if things remain normal. But in the meantime, I'm not scheduling any more trips until we're kind of back to normal, because it's too stressful to deal with like COVID tests. Are you going to get the test in time? And now, as of last week, Americans need to get a COVID test to come back into the US.
Yes.
So it's like you got to find out where to do that. Are they going to do it right? Are you going to get that result in time for your flight? And I'm all like, I don't want to deal with that. So I'm going to wait till things are back to normal before I start traveling again. And yes, I do have humanitarian trips planned, tons of them. I want to go to Sri Lanka. I want to go back to the Philippines. I want to do more water work. I want to do educational work. I want to build a school in the Philippines. There's a lot I want to do. That's
awesome. No, and I know knowing you've been successful with everything you've done, and I have no doubt that you'll be, all your humanitarian efforts that you have for the future are going to be as successful. I mean, gosh, I can talk to you forever, but obviously we've got to wrap up as, this podcast goes for a certain length. But thank you so much, DM, for being on today's show and joining us. And if people want to learn more about you again, how can they find you?
They can visit me on my travel blog. They can go to facebook.com/DM World Adventures, or they can visit me at silkroadproductions.us. That's my event production website. And they can learn more about me and the events that we've got going on. A lot of community events, a lot of things that promote Asian cultures and a lot of different other cultures too.
Absolutely. And also, if you want to learn more about DM besides his blogs, you can go visit us at asianvoicesradio.com. Also, if you have any suggestions for future topics, we would definitely love to hear from you. You can also subscribe as well. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But of course, until next week, I'm Hula Ramos, and on behalf of my until next week, I'm Hula Ramos, and on behalf of my special guest, DM, or Dennis Michael Broussard, we'd like to thank you for listening, and please join us next week for another exciting and thought-provoking Asian Voices radio show. Take care until then, everyone.